if you can realize how you've been acting towards money, and if you can realize when you hear the word budget, what does that make you feel? How do you feel? If you feel overwhelmed, anxious, fearful, don't feel bad. That's how a lot of us feel. Let's dig a little bit deeper and let's figure out why we're feeling that way. That's why money coaching is great, because it starts peeling the layers back of that onion to say money is not the problem. Money is the symptom. Budgeting is easy. Financial planning is easy. Let's get down to the root cause of why someone is not doing that.
Budgeting. We hear it again and again, video after video. Is budgeting limited to only numbers, or is it also dependent on human behavior? My name is Gino Barbaro. This is the Happy Money Podcast, and I'm with my co-host and founder of Barbaro 360, Gino Barbaro, my father. Pops, how we doing? What are you talking about?
Michael, you don't seem too happy. This is the Happy Money Podcast, and it's not a happy topic for you, I think. But today, this week, I should say, you sort of went against what we call the budget. What did you end up buying today that you really didn't need it really didn't fit in your budget?
So I've been following this channel on Instagram. They're an Italian supermarket from New Jersey, and they keep showing me these. Every day I get these videos of this little espresso machine. And it's great because you open the thing, you put a little, I think they call them ESC pods, and in 30 seconds, you've got your coffee made. I'm like, oh, I want to try that. And I saw the price. I think I paid $400. But then I added everything else up. I had Peterson Academy renewal. I had Italian lessons. We went to Universal this weekend. So I'm like, I'm going over my statements. And I said, dang, I spent more than I should have this month. I completely went over my own principles.
Full disclosure, how many different ways can we make coffee in this house? Did you really need this machine?
Absolutely not.
And it was interesting because this morning we're all sitting downstairs. You're on the third floor and the kids start laughing because they hear the machine going on upstairs. I'm like, we got the mocha machines downstairs, which are those little Italian machines for anybody who doesn't know what they are. We've got the Breva. What's that machine called over there? It's like $800 to make machine that way. Mom does her pour overs. We've got so many different ways, but at least you understand it wasn't really a need. It was a want, and you're actually tracking your bills. And for me, the thing that I want to impress upon people is, our language becomes our experience. When you hear the word budget or spending,
it's very restrictive.
We tend to tighten up a little bit, right? So what I ended up doing today, I had a lesson with the kids. Veronica's 17 years old. She's a senior. Cece's 14, right? So I made them husband and wife. And I said, we're going to go through not a budget, but a cash flow plan. And I like that much more. And I spent about 30 minutes with them. Income, expenses, what money's left over. And in this podcast, as we continue along, we're going to share some of the techniques that I'm teaching the kids as far as budgeting goes and what you guys have learned. But I find it to be very interesting, that word budgeting and the word, spending plan. I like cash flow because, like I said, your language becomes your experience and you're managing your cash flow. You're not putting up a budget that's restrictive or a spending plan that's all you're focusing on is spending money and not actually saving money. You were talking to me a little bit about the emotional impact or the emotional component of money and budgeting. You want to expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, so a lot of times we hear budget, like you said, and it's very selective, very numbers wise. However, a lot of times we see that people have either multiple subscriptions or they have multiple DoorDashes or things that they don't really need. And so we look at a budget and we say, okay, let's cut this out, cut this out, cut this out. We never really ask the question why that was there in the first place. Why do we have Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount? Like, what's the reason, right? And if the question is, well, they don't have the show I want to watch. If it comes down to it, we have to ask, what are we willing to sacrifice in order to make our financial freedom a reality rather than just imaginary, right? And so if the question becomes, do I want to have my TV show or do I want to have more room in my budget to do what I need to do? That's the question, right? And then again, even going back to, I want to talk about habits, I want to talk about stress and accountability, because those are three things that we don't look at enough. And it comes down to people are not ignorant and not dumb with their money, but they have these certain habits or these certain stresses that causes them to act out with their money in ways in which they normally wouldn't, right? So I'll give you an example. Where I went to school in downtown St. Augustine. And during college, when I hit 21, I would go into the cigar shops and I would buy a cigar and I wouldn't even go home and smoke it for like 3 months. It was just something nice to buy, Right. And so it was just this feeling of, I like the feeling of buying something. I don't know why. I don't understand why, but I kept doing it anyway. And so I had to discover the reason I was doing that was just to get some sort of hit, just to get some sort of something. And it wasn't until I noticed that I was able to say, okay, now how do I stop this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if that means I'm going to take a different path to school to avoid going to the cigar shop, right?
Mm-hmm. Mickey, that's one of the main reasons why your mom and I became certified money coaches. I couldn't understand that. Those are behaviors or patterns that we adopt. And then all of a sudden, we don't know why we're acting that way. And I'll give you the perfect example. Last night, you and your mom and a friend were over trying to fix the studio. And I, for lack of better words, was acting like a jerk. And I don't know why. Instead of being gracious, instead of saying, hey, you're showing extreme ownership, you're in here, you're trying to fix the lighting, you're trying to get the audio right, you want the video perfect, it drove me nuts because I've been doing this for years and I haven't been able to figure it out. And it was so frustrating. And that's the emotional component of it. I didn't understand. I couldn't verbalize it. And it made me really angry. And I'm here to say sorry to mom. Give me the thumbs up. Thank you. And to you as well, because I didn't mean to act that way. That's just the way that I've been conditioned. And that's not an excuse. I'm not making an excuse. But if you can realize how you've been acting towards money, and if you can realize when you hear the word budget, what does that make you feel? How do you feel? If you feel overwhelmed, anxious, fearful, don't feel bad. That's how a lot of us feel. Mm-hmm. Let's dig a little bit deeper and let's figure out why we're feeling that way. That's why money coaching is great, because it starts peeling the layers back of that onion to say money is not the problem. Money is the symptom. Budgeting is easy. Financial planning is easy. Let's get down to the root cause of why someone is not doing that. And that's the important part. Like you said habits, accountability, and
stress.
So, if you feel stressful about money, are you going to actually go and try to create a budget or a cash flow plan? Probably not. So it's, once again, I acted that way because that's the way I've been pre-programmed to act under stress. I just couldn't control my emotions and I let it out. I'm an adult. You think should be able to act a little bit better, but sometimes it gets the better of me. I get really frustrated over certain things that I think in my mind, I should have figured out years ago, and I still haven't figured out. And here comes along my 23-year-old son that figures it out. And I'm not saying that that's one of the components, but that can be stressful. I'm like, why couldn't I figure it out sooner? Difficult. So that's important. I want to bring that into the budgeting conversation and into the spending conversation and into the money conversation, because it's not that you don't want to create a budget, but sometimes in your mind, subconsciously, you're just, it's being detrimental to yourself and the habits and the patterns that you fall back upon. Maybe that wasn't part of you growing up. Maybe your parents didn't know what a budget was. Maybe they just spent and put tons of money on the credit card, and that's how you've been conditioned.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the conditioning thing, right? Because a lot of times, like you said, you may never have grown up with a budget. And so the first time you see it, you're like, what is this? It's this lie of, can I do it, right? Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe that, if you believe that you can't do it, let's go with that. If you believe you can't do it, then you're not going to do it.
Yes.
Because that's how we are conditioned. We are conditioned to do what we believe. And so if we can believe it and if we can actually trust God that we can actually do this, then we can. It really is that simple in the end, right? Because then you're going to find that people do come into your life, if you're looking for them, if you're praying for that come into your life that can actually help you with this stuff. And then everything changes, right?
Do you mind if I share a story? I don't know if my mom will mind, but I think she will. But that story about the budgeting when we came down to Florida and we were putting a budget. For us, budgeting sort of came secondhand because we lived in what we call the cash world. Mom and I didn't use a lot of credit cards. We basically were in the cash world. Every time I went to the gas station, I would use cash. This is up until I had the restaurant about 10 years ago. So we really had a pretty good control of our money coming in, money coming out. We weren't really big on Amazon. Amazon wasn't big 10, 15 years ago. We didn't have Ring. We didn't have Amazon Prime. Yeah. We only had certain bills. We had a cable bill, a cell phone bill, electric bill. So we knew more or less what was coming in and what was coming out. So I didn't have this, onerous thing on the budget and filling it out every month. I sort of had a pretty good control of it. And I had that experience from the restaurant where you need to have your money coming in every month, every week, and coming out. You need to know what's left over. So I sort of had that. But when we came down to Florida, I remember moving and we were living right across the street and we were living right, you can walk to Publix. And I remember when we moved here, we started the budget because I started realizing, man, we're spending a lot of money on groceries. And I remember creating a budget, and it was like $3,000 for the month for Publix. And I remember it was like week 3 of the budget, and all of a sudden I had you inputting in the numbers. You were like 14 years old at the time, and you're like, Dad, we're going over budget. It's like $3,300 this month so far for Publix.
You go to Publix, you buy 3 things, and you spend $300. I don't understand. Every Floridian doesn't understand Publix.
Well, you know what the great thing about that was? And Mom in the background is going, what do you mean we're going over budget? He was like yelling at us. But it was a great learning point and a teaching point for us. It's because not that Publix is expensive or not. There's other alternatives.
Yeah.
We started going to Costco and buying stuff in bulk.
So much nicer at Costco.
Buying the cheaper stuff, right? So to your point, we have an allocate a certain percentage of our income. We can direct it with a budget. Ramsey's proven this, and there's a lot of other people that have proven this. You can save up to 15 to 20% of the money that you're spending just by having a disciplined budget every month because you're allocating your dollars to every activity. Does this sound a little restrictive? It can be in the beginning, but when you know you have the opportunity to say, I want Amazon Prime, I need that. Do I really need Netflix? Or do I really want Disney? Or do I really need Hulu and Peacock and Paramount? And they start adding up. You have the opportunity to know how much you want to save, how much you want to spend, what's left over, and then allocate that money towards whatever you're trying to spend and get rid of things that you don't want to. You actually have more control. When you feel more in control, you have more options, then the fear and the anxiety start to fade away from making those money decisions.
There's a reason why a society cannot exist without laws. Can you imagine if for one day, 24 hours, every law was off the book?
That would be great.
And then stuff happens and you're like, this is horrible, right?
Yes.
But that's how our finances go.
Yes.
There's no laws in the book. It's free game. We buy whatever we want, whenever we want. And it doesn't work.
Well,
and it's proven that
it only works if you're the federal government and you can continue to print money.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's when it works. When you have fiat currency, that works. But you can see exactly what happens. You have the interest on the debt is $1 trillion. Then you see, wow, how much money are they actually just wasting to printing money into the debt in the economy?
But even with that, we're starting to see like we are the ones who are receiving the, what do you call it? They're destroying the economy. They might not be taking as big of a hit, but the American people are, right?
Yes.
And so at some point or another, a lack of financial responsibility is gonna hurt someone at some point. And that's been proven because our dollar is worth significantly less today, than 5 years ago.
I want to lead with a couple of quotes here. And this is from Ben Franklin. A small leak will sink a great ship. And that's what happens when you don't have a cash flow plan. You get little drips. This month I didn't have enough money to cover my bills. I've got to go into credit card debt a little bit. It's only a little bit. It's only a little leak. Then you don't have the plan like you said. And there's no rules. And that leak gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And your boat fills up a little bit more. You don't even notice it. It's such a small drip. But by the end of the month, and then by the end of the year, then by the end of 3 years, it's like, wow, that small leak filled the ship up and I'm going to sink right now. That's what we're trying to avoid when we want to create a budget.
And that's everything. That's not just a budget. So, for example, I'm doing a great workout routine with a great chiropractor down the street. And, sometimes there's some days where I just don't want to do the workouts. Some days I don't do the workouts. And then over time, the more time I put it off, the more time that leak is getting bigger and you get weaker and you get weaker. And when you actually go back to it, now you don't have enough to hold on to, right? And so now we have to reset. So what does that look like in our financial situation where we dig such a big hole for ourselves? We get to the point now where it's so difficult to turn back and cut out these other things. But if we don't, at the same time, it's going to kill us.
When you're looking at your budget or your cash flow plan, where are there holes in your plan? What do you see the deficiencies, or where would you like to see it get stronger?
I've said this time and time again, I'm not good with subscriptions. I always forget to cancel them. And I always am in the wrong spot when I remember. And so for me, it comes down to being intentional and saying, when is the time? Because you're always adding and taking away, right? It's an ongoing problem, right? And it comes down to when is the time that I can set aside and say, I'm going to go through all these.
Michael, shouldn't you set a reminder for yourself? Like you and I do weekly what we call level 10 meetings. Every Wednesday after our marketing plan, we'll do a meeting. We'll go through the income expenses. We'll go through what we're spending on the marketing plan. We'll go through what we really want to focus on the business. Shouldn't you be setting yourself a reminder once a month to look through your credit cards?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something very simple, but that's something where there's a rhythm. And that's why I want to impress upon you and all your siblings that your personal financial story, what's going on in your personal financial story, you need to run it like it's a business. And I think if you don't do that, that's where people get into trouble. The first lesson that we had with the kids last week, I pulled out a T12, a trailing 12. I showed them income, expenses, and net operating income. It's the same thing in personal. You have income coming in. You've got all your operating expenses, maybe some fixed expenses, variable expenses,
in there.
a lot, and taxes. Exactly. So it's not what you make. It's what you keep. And you have to figure that. That's the top line. What's your net revenue? And you have to understand that number, right? And then you have to take away all the expenses you have. And then from there, what's left over? That's how a business is profitable. They have to focus on their cash flow every month, make sure that they have enough money to pay their bills and that there's something left over at the end of the month, Mike.
And even if we need to get to a point in our life, in our financial budgeting where, we do cut back significantly, like at some point, we're also trying to work towards where we can enjoy life, right?
Yes.
And so it comes down to, we say, take off the subscriptions, do this, do that. But the goal eventually is to be able to enjoy that. If we can't do it now, let's learn the discipline so that we can do it later in the future.
But let's also pick the ones that you want, right? I mean, it's interesting. You want to buy a Glock this month, or do you want to have 4 or 5 subscriptions? Maybe you can't have both.
Yeah.
What's more important to you? You can't have both. And if you're an adult and you say, I want both, but you can't afford both, then you go into credit card debt because of this. Is that worth it? No, short-term pain, long-term gain. If you can't delay that instant gratification, you're not going to be successful as an adult. And that's what I'm trying to teach you guys is by saying, well, where do I cut it back? What's more important to me, these subscriptions or this Glock, right? I can't answer that question. But if you can't have both, which one do you prioritize?
Which is more important, yeah. Yeah.
I've got some props here. I'm going to hold this up.
Go ahead.
This is what I started teaching y'all when the kids were young. Very simple. Glass jars. Why glass jars? This one says charity. This one says spending. And this one says saving. So when you guys got money from Grandma Vanna for birthdays, or you got money from Christmas, or you got money for getting paid for something, I would allocate it to you. You guys would get it. It's your money. Obviously, the bigger checks, I'd put it into the bank for you to save. But for a 9-year-old, when you're taking money away from them, you're going to say, I'm going to go put it in the bank for you. It's like a punishment. Like they can't conceive of that idea. So that's why the glass jars are great. I used to use spice jars, so I've upgraded. I'm using mason jars now.
We had the plastic. It was the plastic with the red top, right?
Yes. Those worked really well, right?
I have PTSD from those.
And you get $10. And then you allocate it anyway, right? Whatever percentage. You want to put 30% to save, 30% to spend, and 30% for charity. Because remember, we'd go down to the Friars and you guys would bring your money down there and you'd be able to allocate as part of charity. And the kids can actually see that, wow, you're teaching them a couple of things. Number one, you're teaching them the discipline of having that dollar and it has different jobs. Every dollar has a different job, right? That's the first thing. And I think the second thing is you're giving them ownership over their money. And they're starting to make decisions. So when they turn 18, it's like, oh, wow, I never really made a decision in life with my own money. What do I do now?
Yeah.
It's better to start small and to teach kids this little framework where it's their money, help them out, help them decide, and you can change the percentages up. The percentages don't mean anything, but the fact that they can see their own cash in here and they're like proud, like, wow, this is pretty cool. If I save money, here's money. Whenever I need it, it's here for me to use, and I can use this money to go buy a toy, or I can use this money and give it at church. It's my decision, whatever I want to do with my money.
Yeah. And I think that's important, like you said, because these are the financial skills and habits that we need in adult life. At some point or another, we're going to need to know how to do this, regardless of position, regardless of where we are. If we're a teacher, if we're an accountant, if we're a CEO, we're going to need to know how to use this for a business purpose or for our own personal life. So it's better to start young. But if you're 26, 27, have never done budgeting in your life, well, now is the time to start.
How do they start? If you've never done it before, you've been fortunate enough to have me to be investing in my deals. I mean, listen, your tax return is 50 pages long. You've got 10K.
I hate my return.
You're only 23 years old. That's pretty incredible, right? So you have a leg up. And it's great because it's not just the money and the investments. It's the mindset that you have. It's the ability to say, wow, I've created this foundation. I know my income coming in, my expenses. What would you say to somebody who's listening to this, who's feeling pretty overwhelmed? Where can they go out and what resources could they read? Can they read Dave Ramsey's book and will that help them out? Or do you have any other books or any other recommendations?
So budgeting is interesting. I'm looking at these jars right here. And I even think the best way to start is to take $100 of your own paycheck and just put it in the jars. It started that way. Started
Mm-hmm.
extremely simple so that you understand what it looks like. And at the end of the month, do what the jars are saying to do. If it says $30 for spending, go buy something for $30. If it says $20 for charity, go to the local homeless shelter or organization and give $20 to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the mindset of this dollar needs to have a purpose. Otherwise, it will escape and do its own thing.
I love that. It'll escape.
It
Whereas
will
it
escape.
usually escapes, in your point, to espresso
It
machines and to
escapes to
guns.
us, right?
Right?
Yes,
To me, lately it's been escaping to donkeys, to cows, to the
Oh,
farm.
yes.
So if I'm not a steward of my money, and it really doesn't matter how much money you make, if you're not set up on a budget, whether you're making $3 million a year or you're making $30,000
Yeah.
a year, we all have the same problems. It's all limited resources.
Yeah.
And you may say, well, if I make $3 million a year, yeah, $3 million when you get taxed really becomes $2 million, which is still amazing. But if you've got 4 houses, 3 cars, a jet, a boat, all of a sudden it doesn't
Your
seem like
money's
a lot of
gone.
money,
Yeah.
right?
Like I said, it's the same problem, just different situation, right?
Mhm.
And I hear it all the time. Same people. I've got $300,000 salary and I have no money. I'm living
Mhm.
paycheck to paycheck.
Mhm.
And again, it comes down to the more money you make, the more that you feel like you need to do stuff with that money.
Mhm.
And so you feel bad. And so you're like, I'm going to go buy this car to impress people. And then it doesn't work out, like you said. You've got no money left over.
Mhm. Before we sign off, I just want to share a couple of systems that I've used with budgeting. The first one, Michael, you can say it, pay yourself first. And what that means basically is if you get $1,000 at the end of the week, you get $1,000, you pay yourself first. Take out a portion that you want to pay yourself to save. Let's say it's 20%, $200. Then the rest of that $800, you allocate it percentage-wise. Over here, I've got the 60-20-20. 60% needs, 20% wants, and you'd save 20%. You can break it down that way. Because I think I was always under the impression when I was younger, save, save, save. Don't enjoy the money. But then when you have that mindset and all you've done is saving, when you get a little bit older, you're scared to spend that money because you've been growing up in scarcity. And all of a sudden, your mindset is like, I can't touch that money. That money's to be saved, not to enjoy it. So I think you really need to enjoy a little bit of that money. And I'm totally against Dave Ramsey's point where, hey, if you have debt, you've got to kill that debt. Put every single dollar towards that debt. Well, that's like a person who weighs 300 pounds and they go on a really restrictive diet and they get down to 180 pounds. They think they've done it. They've really cut everything out. Their life is miserable. Well, the ones that ends up happening to that person 3 or 4 months later, they go back to gaining that weight because all of a sudden they took everything away from themselves that they enjoyed. And then all of a sudden they feel as if they've been restricted in life. Well, you know what? I can have an ice cream. I can enjoy, I can get back on. I can have a couple beers. I can have a little bit more food. I can have some more potato chips. And that's what ends up happening. It's the same thing with debt. If you've got $1,000 in debt and you've got money coming in every month, I would not say to myself, I'm going to put it all towards the debt and I'm not going to, enjoy that, a little bit of that portion. Start picking away at that debt, but don't go full bore and spend all that money to pay the debt off. Leave some of that behind to actually enjoy it. It really comes down to when we talk about with money coaching and the psychology of money. And it's just, human behavior. If you're going to continually deny yourself of at least a little pleasure, you're going to feel as if it's a punishment. And then what ends up happening is you pay off that debt. Once that debt's paid off, it's like, great, got no more debt. I'm going to go out and buy another gun, or I'm going to go out and buy another espresso machine. Where am I going to buy it? On the credit card. You accumulate more debt. And I think it's just as unhealthy to say, I'm going to cut up all of my credit cards. You made the great point saying that, why is it that I have to cut my credit cards up? What is making me spend that extra money on the credit cards? Diagnose the problem and the habit and try to overcome that. Try to work on that problem instead of saying, I'm going to eliminate that and I'm going to get rid of any kind of pleasures in my life.
Yeah. That's interesting to cut up the credit cards, just like you said, why are we using the credit card in the first place? And then once we figure out the problem, hey, I enjoy not paying. I enjoy seeing the money not leave my checking account for 30 days. Stuff like that. It makes sense. If we can't diagnose the problem first, it doesn't make sense. But once we do, then we can make the decision of, do I actually want to cut this up? Right? And we can make that decision.
And I would say to anybody, if they're looking to find out more about money coaching, just go to barbaro360.com. You can schedule a call there. The first thing I do is just download our book, Happy Money, Happy Family, Happy Legacy. It really talks about your relationship with money, and it's my journey and our family's journey. with our relationship with money. I've had a lot of struggles with it. I've had a lot of sleepless nights about it. I've had a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety about money with others. And I'm just sharing my journey in the book. And if you want to take a deeper dive, just schedule a call with somebody on the team and let's start talking about, your relationship with money. It's so important. And it's such an important component to this conversation we're having about budgeting and spending and cash flow plans.
That's great. That's great.
Do I have to look in the camera when I say?
I don't know what to say. Okay, so to recap, the 3 things that we need to be aware of are our habits. What's the reason we're doing something in the first place, and how do we avoid those temptations of spending, really? And the second thing is stress. One thing I will always say to people is if you can, make sure you get enough sleep. I think this does not get talked about enough. People are on 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and a lot of times we choose to be in those situations. I talk to a lot of people who are like, I don't get enough sleep. I'm like, what's the last thing you do before you go to bed? I go, I'm on my phone. I'm watching TV. Okay, well, there's your answer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're one of those people and you're hearing this is your chance to maybe notice that and see how that would be a little bit easier in your life. Because I'm telling you, I've had early in college, I would be up to 2 or 3 in the morning, talking to friends, playing video games with friends, etc. And then I think junior and senior year, I had a time where I was getting the sleep that I needed to. And it's a completely night and day situation, right? I can make choices better. I can make better choices quicker. And the last thing is a lack of accountability. This is why I love coaching or having at least somebody to walk with you on whatever journey you are on. Because I've tried the AI coaching. That's a big thing right now. Maybe we can talk about that for a couple minutes. AI coaching is great for quick questions, and you can get answers. Like, for example, I like to record music. And so if I have a little question about, hey, what's the EQ on this? What we'll go here. That's great. But to have somebody actually tell me that has, a mind and a soul behind that, the advice that I get is a lot more powerful because I know that's real. There's something real about a person that you cannot replicate.
We're going to hold that for the next show. We're going to do a little work on AI coaching and accountability because that's so important to the name of the game. I love that, Michael. We want to thank you for spending a part of your day with us. My name is Gino Barbaro, co-founder of Barbaro 360, and I'll see you on the next Happy Money podcast.